just first off, I just want to ask you about having a disabled representative on the NTA board. I know that has come up, that there hasn't been, since 2020, there's been no disabled representative on the board. I'm just wondering, why is that, when there was a commitment? I know when Minister Shane Ross was Minister, there was a commitment that there would be on each of the boards, Bus Air and Irish Rail, and I'm just wondering why there isn't on the NTA.
So we do have a disability committee that works very closely with the NTA. So it's made up of a number of different interests around different kinds of disability as well. They do report into the board and regularly meet with board members as well.
And would you think it would be a good idea to have a specific person on the board? That I suppose that was promised, like that.
Yeah, I think it's always responsible to have as many interests represented on the board as well. We've been going through some recruitment recently. Well, the Department of Transport has been going through some recruitment recently as well, to try and ensure that we've got that diversity of knowledge and experience on the NTA board. Of course, we do still work very closely with a good number of representatives who are on that disability committee. That supports
and I suppose just around the area, around disability, about having and this has come up, I suppose, from a safety point of view as well, and hopefully we will get representatives from disabled groups coming in here about, and maybe talk to yourselves about the lack of availability of ramps. Like, we're way behind the rest of Europe when it comes to lack of availability of ramps. Clamping, I suppose wheelchair clamps on buses and on trains, and I suppose that's not only is it a safety point of view, but it's a worry when you are, if you are in a wheelchair, if you're a wheelchair user and you can't be properly clamped in. So I'm just wondering, what are the efforts to kind of ensure that we have a real accessible transport, an inclusive form of transport? Because it is it's a big effort if someone, people have free transport. If you're a disabled person with free transport, but what's the point in having it if you can't use it? If you can't, first of all, you can't access buses, and secondly, that you don't feel safe on a bus.
So in terms of the bus fleet replacement strategy, there is new designs on those buses that will cater for disability access, more space for wheelchairs, prams, etc. Same on the Lewis as well, and we're working with Irish Rail to make trains and stations more accessible as well.
And could it be standard that there's going to be ramps on all trains, that it shouldn't be a big fuss, that it shouldn't be a big deal that you have to ring ahead if you're going to use a train to have to make sure there's a ramp on it, or a bus?
Yeah.
Is there a commitment towards that from the NTA?
So we're definitely working with Irish Rail as to how we can make rail services more accessible. That's why we're giving more funding to help them do those things in the stations as well. I think we're also dealing with some very old infrastructure as well, so the station designs and stuff. So that retrofitting
and even
is
buses,
what we can do.
Even with the existing buses, I suppose.
Yeah, and there is the rolling replacement of the fleet as well. Hugh, I don't know whether you wanted to add any more to that.
Yeah, we do a number of things in the bus and coach area to try and improve accessibility, particularly wheelchair accessibility. So a number of years ago, we moved away from the high floor coaches where people used a lift rather than a ramp, and we had to get a special vehicle designed that would use a wheelchair ramp, and we purchased like 140 of those, and they're deployed around the country. And then,
which is nothing in the grand scale of the amount of buses that are available, that.
Yeah, but it's quite a percentage in terms of the out of city service. On the city services, then we've done things like enlarged wheelchair space, enlarged buggy space, then to make sure that the space for buggy not occupying.
But if you have a motorised wheelchair, I suppose if you can't get on, there's no point in having that.
If you can't get on, we designed them that all bar the very largest wheelchair, which perhaps we can't accommodate, but in general we can accommodate virtually all types of wheelchairs. And in terms of the ramps, then the new buses we order, we've required that there's a second manual ramp installed at the centre door in case the motorised ramp at the front door is out of order, which as you probably know sometimes is. So there's a lot of measures that are very good, but we're not complacent. We're not saying we're done.
No, and I suppose that's where maybe having a disabled person on the board, the actual board itself, rather than a feeder group, would be very important, as a representative voice.
It's also it is the Minister of Transport that appoints the people to our board. We don't.
So I can raise it with him. That's perfect. And